At Cognitive FX, we're a little bit different. We don't do a pen and paper assessment in our cognitive sessions. We go to that functional scan and we look at how the different systems are communicating, and then we target our therapy based on how those different systems are working together. My name is Michelle, and I'm a cognitive therapist here at Cognitive FX. All of the cognitive therapists that are here, we are all speech-language pathologists, but within our scope of practice is cognition. And cognition includes lots of cognitive skills like memory, working memory, attention, different kinds of attention, logical reasoning, executive function type skills. At Cognitive FX, we're a little bit different. We don't do a pen and paper assessment in our cognitive sessions. We go to that functional scan and we look at how the different systems are communicating, and then we target our therapy based on how those different systems are working together to complete different cognitive tasks. So like, for example, we have a section in the scan that looks at memory, and we might see that some parts of the brain are working really hard to complete memory tasks, and then other parts are a bit sluggish. So we want to work on that system of the brain so that that system can work more efficiently and take less energy, and therefore help that person with those memory tasks. For example, if someone was struggling with memory, and it might be helpful to know actually that with memory, attention is foundational for that. Attention is actually foundational for most of the cognitive tasks that we do, because if you can't attend, then it's really hard to do other things. You can't attend to what you're reading, then it's going to be hard to process it, to remember it. So we do a lot of attention exercises. We have sustained attention, so the ability to be able to do a task for a longer period of time. Because we might be like, oh, I can do that for 5 minutes, but once it's after 5 minutes, I start feeling foggy, I'm getting a headache, I can't think clearly, so that cognitive fatigue is setting in. So we want to work on increasing that endurance. And then there's shifting attention, where you kind of go from one task to another task. For example, you're working on your computer and then someone comes and asks you a question. So to be able to kind of seamlessly go from one task to the other task, then we work on that as well. Sometimes people will think of that as multitasking, kind of being able to do things at the same time, switch back and forth from those things. Another is selective attention, being able to stay focused on a task when there are things going on around you, not letting those distract you and take your attention. And that's kind of closely related to distraction suppression, being able to filter out irrelevant information, which is something that a lot of people that we work with have difficulty with. So that affects attention as well. You're working on something, you hear something, and your attention goes there, and then, oh, okay, yeah, I got to get back to this task. Or being able to, like if we were having a conversation and then someone else started having a conversation next to us, and your brain just wants to hear everything. It thinks everything is important instead of thinking that's not important. I can just stay focused on this conversation that we're having. So we work on that as well. That's important for people who have difficulty in restaurants or the grocery store, because there's so much going on. So we want to work on the brain's ability to filter that out so that it's not so exhausting or draining to do those kinds of activities. Talking about distraction suppression, I think this is actually a really interesting thing, because the part of our brain that's responsible for that is the thalamus. Call the thalamus the gatekeeper, because it is what the different senses go through before it goes to different parts of the brain for processing. And so when the thalamus is working well, it does well at kind of letting in the appropriate amounts of information and important information. So it lets in the right amount of sound or light and those things. But if the thalamus is not working efficiently because of an injury or a neurological disorder or even a sickness like long COVID, then it's not working as well to filter out that unimportant stimuli. So you might go to, like we said, the grocery store, the lights are coming in, it's super bright, it's overwhelming, the noise is coming in, it's overwhelming. So we do exercises that focus on that. And what it might look like in here is we might do a puzzle, and we'll put on some background noise, and I'll actually put on some noise that might be a little tempting for you to listen to, something that's interesting to you, so you have to work a little bit harder to ignore that. So that's giving your thalamus, that distraction suppression, a little bit of a chance to work and filter that unimportant information. And it's so fun to see people change in here, because sometimes at the beginning of the week, it's awful, it's overwhelming, all they can hear is the noise, they can't focus, they can't think clearly. And then near the end, it's, oh, I hardly even noticed that was on. And that's awesome. So some other exercises we might do here are memory exercises. And there are different parts of memory. There's encoding, and then storage and retrieval. And we work on all of those different parts of memory. The encoding part is really important, because if you think about wanting to remember something for a longer period of time, it's good to have that information organized and put into that memory system well so you can retrieve it. Working memory is another thing that we work on, and working memory is that short-term memory where you just hold on to things long enough to remember them for a short amount of time, and you might move that information around as well. It might look like getting a phone number and remembering it just long enough to dial that phone number, and then we kind of let it go. But we also hold things in our working memory long enough to transfer them over to our long-term memory. And so the better we can organize that information, kind of label that information, the easier it will be to retrieve it. So sometimes we might do an exercise where we give someone words to remember, and we'll give them an opportunity to organize those, whether it's by preference or by the one they like more or least, or by making a visual picture. Those are all ways to encode that information, which makes the retrieval easier. Word finding. Sometimes we'll couple different exercises together, like we'll do a card sort, then give someone a distraction while we're doing that. That exercise actually works memory, attention, sustained attention, and shifting attention, and then oftentimes some language skills like word finding. And that might look like having someone give us the opposites of words, or naming, 5 girl names or 5 cities or things like that. And that works those systems of the brain important for finding words. If you've ever been in that situation where you're like, oh, I know the word, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Practicing those different exercises kind of helps those systems work more fluidly, so that it helps in those real life moments of trying to find those words.